I'm Tricia Brown, and my mom, Patty Joyce Watson Finch, was born in 1929. Patty loved her family, and she loved the farmhouse that she grew up in. At her funeral, she had left a note that she had written years before about things she loved at different times in her life. And when she was a child, she loved her mom and her dad and her sisters and brothers. And she specifically mentioned Collier and Marguerite. She loved the horse Nellie that they had growing up as a child. She loved sitting on the planks that are by the steps, the concrete planks, with her back against the rock, probably with one of her sisters, waiting for some boy to come down the hill, because they didn't have phones. So the only way they knew company was coming is if they saw dust coming down the hillside, and then they had to go, I imagine, get freshened up for whoever might show up. She always loved going home. That's all we did for vacation for years. I think my family did not take a family vacation that was not to go home until I was 17. And I was doing something else. But they went to the beach or something. But every other vacation, since Dad was in the Navy, was going to the farmhouse, see his family and to see family. It was, I didn't know there was any other thing than having a close family. The feeling that I got about how she felt about her mom and her dad was that Ira just had mom, I don't know what they even called her, Mama, I think, had just a love and a presence. She was always there. She was always serene, calm, that I knew, that I saw, and that I heard from my mother. I think they got a little exasperated with her. I know they got a little exasperated with her when she started having more and more dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever later in her life, thinking that she could probably do better, and remember more. But even then, she was always pleasant. She was happy. Great fodder for my dad, because he could tell her a joke and she wouldn't remember. He could tell her again. She'd be just as happy to hear the punchline. So she was always happy. She was just a happy person, as I remember her. And I got the feeling growing up and listening to Mom, although I didn't ever hear any stories that necessarily back this up, but that they sort of thought of their father, Papa, as like you hear people thinking about God, that they were in awe of him, that they respected him, they thought he was a good person, and they were fearful of him. I never saw him be upset, angry, speak a harsh word, but I got the idea that you didn't want to, that was not something you wanted to do, was cross whatever line there was, and I don't know where it might have been. That he was somebody that was to be held in awe, and they liked that. They respected what he did. I've heard at one of the family reunions we were talking about what it was like growing up at the farmhouse. I wish we had taped that. That would have been super.
One of the things I want to ask you about is I noticed from pictures that even though they're out in what looks like the Dust Bowl era, Patty is dressed to the nines at all times.
I think she was always the glamour girl. I hear about shoes. She always loved shoes throughout her whole life, and I think she did growing up. And she was kind of prissy, I think, maybe. She was, growing up, she certainly carried herself that way. She had the posture of a marching band leader. She was always carried herself well, liked to look nice. She had something going for her in that she can ride around the boat on a lake and her hair does not, and she can just run a comb through it. It doesn't tangle. She and Geet strike me as being the closest together, the closest alike at this point. They're both, real glamour girls. So She had a reputation. Patty had a reputation, I know, when my dad was in the Navy. And I don't know that she ever did this, but her reputation was of mowing the grass in high heels, short shorts and high heels. So, she got her hair dyed platinum. Probably this was all in mid to late 50s. She got contacts when they first came out. Her house always looked like House and Gardens could come over and do their photo shoot whenever they wanted to. There was nothing to be done. She kept a really pretty house. She had rules that draperies, the fabric that you wanted to see was on the inside. The part that went to the outside was always white. And she had a lot of class. She was very classy lady. And they talk about at a family reunion one time, they were talking about that they grew up poor, but they didn't know they were poor. And I think that's absolutely true, that they didn't know that and they didn't act that way. I remember Mother telling stories of going downtown or being downtown after school and stopping in a store and maybe buying shoes or something. And they'd have these pink checks at every store, the blank pink checks that you could just write on. And so she would just write it on the family account, and that may be where you didn't want to make Papa mad. But yeah, she was, and if you look at the house, I've never thought of it as somebody's that was poor house. I always thought that house is beautiful. The arches always strike me as just being gorgeous. I love arches to this day, I think, from looking at that house. It's strong. The rock is just gorgeous. And then it would have a windmill in the back. I mean, it's a beautiful house. I think it was very frustrating to Mama that it was probably a really not, and it had indoor plumbing. My other grandmother didn't have indoor plumbing. She didn't have indoor plumbing until I was like in junior high. So I always thought going to Mama's house to the farmhouse was great. I thought they were more in the times than not. And it was always, well, I don't know about always, but it was sparsely furnished. Didn't have a lot of furniture. The middle room had a bed and a standalone wardrobe. The front room had 2 full beds, double beds in it, and a really pretty dressing table. At one point, they had a bed in the hallway that someone slept in, and they had either different things in the front bedroom, either a double bed or I think there's twin beds in there now. But I think growing up that they had a double bed in that room. And it was the house was really pretty and nice, and I never remember it being, that might be where Mother got it. I remember the house being uncluttered and kept well. There was, not a lot of, there had to have been dust. There's so much dust out there. But the feeling was that it was very clean and neat.
But tell me about Papa and singing.
Well, I think he was with a quartet for a while. He loved to go to church. He sang at church all the time. And the quartet was probably with church. But he would sing around the house. I remember hearing him sing as he was getting ready to go out. And he listened to music on the radio as he was getting ready in the morning to go out to take care of the cows. He loved to sing. And the family grew up loving to sing. I think they all sang together, and they do to this day when they get an opportunity. So
everybody's is kind of musically inclined.
Or they think so, or they enjoy it, whether they're good at it or not, which is the whole point. There's 2 years difference between Collier and I. So Collier was just a baby when Mom was expecting me. And I think my dad was overseas while she was pregnant, so before they went to College Station and I was actually born. So she probably was pregnant at the house when Collier was 1.5 to 2, somewhere in that area. I've always thought that. I thought I grew up thinking that it was really cool that we had this family that spread its there was no generation definition that one generation just flowed into the other, because Kyer's only 2 years older than I am. Geet's, I think, 7 years older than I am, maybe 5. If I'm wrong, Geet, sorry. And then, my kids ended up growing up with Kyer's kids being the same, within the same age of each other. And then to this day, we have cousins that if you actually look at their lineage, they might be 5 generations out, or however you say
Once
that.
removed or twice removed.
5 removals away from each other. Because Danny, who's my cousin, his grandchildren play with my grandchildren, so I don't do the math. I don't know what that comes up to, but they're close with each other. And that's really cool that they're going to grow up and still be close with each other like that. I don't know very many families that can say that. The reunion at the farmhouse started when Kristen was like 1 or 2. I don't know the year for that. Laura was born in 74. Which would have, so it's probably 73 or 74 that it started at the farmhouse. And I think they had it at the farmhouse for a few years, and then they started alternating from farmhouse to state parks, which was really nice. The young kids especially loved that. But then everybody loves to be at the farmhouse too, so it was a nice mix to go from one to the other. But reunion started long before that. I remember as a child going to the reunion, the Watson reunion, which was Papa's family's reunion at Lampasas. And I really think that as I was getting ready for this, it dawned on me that I think that might have something to do with why reunion's so special to us to this day, is that when it was Papa's family reunion at Lampasas, I think that was the only time he ever left the cows overnight. So that was the only time as a family that they were away from work together. And it must have been a really special time to look forward to have, to just go through. And it was fun. They had a little cottage hotel that was in Lampasas, and next to it was a city park. And I don't think we even cooked out. I think we'd buy chicken and things like that and have sandwiches in the daytime and fried chicken and sides or something in the evening. And there was a city pool right next to that had Lampasas River running through it, so it was very, very cold. The guys would go golf. The kids would play at the park all day, and we'd, have a meal. And it was just a fun time. Being a kid, all I remember is playing and swimming, and the hotel some. But that had to have been a really special time for the family to go away together and be with their dad overnight somewhere else.
So tell me first of all about Patty's years living at the farmhouse.
Patty lived there from the time the farmhouse was built until she went away to college to the University of North Texas, which might not have been called that at that point, because she went to college with Vita. So she went at 16. She told us growing up, well, she didn't date until she was a freshman. Well, she was 12. She liked boys. She did like boys. And she probably always had lots of them around her. She was always well liked by the opposite sex. So she lived there all the time. And then we would always come back. The object was to have all your children in Texas. And so even though my dad was in the Navy, she had all 4 of her children in Texas. Wayne was born actually in Coleman in 1956, and that's when I lived there. It was for a few years when she moved there to be there while she was pregnant, and then have the baby, because I think my dad was in between stations or something. And so I went to the elementary school with Kyer. I rode the bus with Kyer and Geet and Carolyn. Of course, Geet and Carolyn couldn't have anything to do with me, and I don't blame them. At that age, I wouldn't either. So I don't remember much about them, but Kyer and I kind of buddied around together. He might just have had to, since we were in the same school. But I remember walking home from the cattle guard, from the school bus. And I remember, living there. It was one of the cool things about Mama was meals were set at a certain time, and you needed to get up and have them. And it was whatever she put on the table. There was no what would you like, or do you want to wait 30 minutes later? This was mealtime. You could eat it when it was there. So you got up and ate. But the kitchen was always really warm and friendly. You had I loved the cabinets. I still do. They have these cabinets in the kitchen that are right at kid level. That she kept the cereal and the peanut butter and the syrup, so you can make scrape. So you'd come in and make breakfast in the morning, or she'd make toast. And I always thought the toast was fantastic there because she would have Mama would make toast in the broiler in the bottom of the oven. So she would already have butter on it, and then one side would be toasted and the other side would still be soft. And to this day, I think that's the best toast that you can have.
Tell me real quickly about scrape. I haven't had an opportunity.
Oh my gosh. You get a plate and you put peanut butter and you put syrup on top of it and you scrape it all together and then you put it on toast. We grew up with scrape. Everybody, I think there. Of course, I think it was my favorite, but everybody else ate scrape.
Do you know
and it was Karo syrup.
Okay, not maple syrup, but Karo syrup.
Right. My mom came back to the farmhouse before she finished college. She went for 3 years. Vita got to finish, but Mother only went for 3 years because Mama had Collier, and she needed to come home and help at the farmhouse. So Collier was born really late in life for them, but all the girls thought that was their baby, and they all helped raise Collier. It's surprising that he turned out as well as he did with all these mothers that he had. But they to this day they all feel like he's their baby. So no lack of love for that young man.
Right.
Papa loved babies and he loved little kids. And he would make time for them when he was in the house. If he wasn't out working with the stock, the cows, then he would, if he was sitting in the kitchen or something, he would play with them. He'd have them on his knee. He would talk to them. He just really liked kids a lot. I know he was tremendously respected in the community. I know every one of his kids respects him. They all have such pride, and I grew up with pride that my family had a 1,000-acre cattle dairy farm in Texas. He had a very good business. I think he was honest with everybody. Attended church regularly, and had this family that grew up pretty nicely, all of them. So they were all respected, and I think Mama was always just very pleasant in my estimation, and from what I've heard. So they had a regimented life, I think, in that the cows had to be milked twice a day, and then you had to take care of them with whatever else you did. They were very segregated as to who did what. The boys could go and work and there weren't very many boys, could go and work at the barn, and the girls did work at the house. The girls didn't go to the barn to do any work. The girls could do work at the house. But Mama was responsible for providing meals for all the hands at lunchtime for a number of years. So she had to, get up and have breakfast for him before dawn, so that he could get out there before dawn and be ready for the cows, and then spend time cooking the lunch for everybody, and then supper. That was dinner, and then supper was a much lighter meal. And sometimes when they had ice cream supper, that's what they had, ice cream. That was supper. It wasn't something else and then ice cream. That was their supper. And then there was no washing machine there, and there couldn't be anyway because the water supply was limited. Drinking water for that family was a 5-gallon tin that they hauled in from town. When you think about the amount of water that we drink these days, we're trying to drink a gallon of water every person every day. I'm sure they didn't want those kids drinking a gallon of water every day out of that 5-gallon tin. So you had to go into town to get water. And you had to, when to wash clothes, she would take all the washing in to the laundromat. And when I lived there I remember going in with her, and Collier and I would wander around town, go to Aunt Dodie's house, and I'd get lost. Collier knew where he was going. It's not that big a town, but he could lose me easy, and I'd just be sitting there going, now what am I going to do? But it was probably a really fun place to grow up, because when you did get to go to town, they could just let you loose and you could go do what you want to do. I think they got to go into town on Saturdays and watch movies. They did have a movie theater even in 1956 when I lived there and my brother was being born. They got to go into town and watch a movie on Saturdays. I don't know if it was every Saturday, but some they got to. And then back to the laundry, Mama would take that laundry back home, all wet, all these big tubs of it, and hang it out on the line and let it dry. And usually with the hot sun and the wind, it was fine. I don't know what it was like in the wintertime. I don't know how they did that. And, sometimes the cows would come through there and knock it down and it'd get dirty again. She would be really angry. I did see Mama angry, mostly at the cows. But I don't think I ever saw Papa angry. At a family reunion, you eat and you talk. And then you eat and you talk some more. And that's mostly what you do. So we usually get there at a family reunion at Friday sometime. And then some meals are assigned and notes go out before reunions. And everybody gets an assignment of what they are to prepare or bring. So you really only have one meal that you're partially responsible for. And then the rest of them, you can just go eat whatever you want. And then everybody brings lots of goodies. Cakes. Ruth's chocolate cake always has to be there. That's a must at family reunion. Betty makes fantastic cookies. So do Alan and Treva. They must have all her recipes. And then some of us just bring Oreos, if we can't have any imagination. But nobody misses. Oreos are always gone. So people go, well, what do you do? Well, we sit and we talk and we visit with each other and we show and we show pictures of other times when we were sitting and talking and visiting with each other. This was last reunion where we did this, and then we enjoy doing that and hearing me laugh, and we laugh, and all the girls laugh the same. You can hear it. They have a wind up where they start laughing, and then a wind down, and so you laugh really loud, and then you go, ah, and they all go, ah. But they just laugh all the time. So that's family reunion. Saturday, when we had it at the state parks, at the very beginning, the state parks just had bunks, and that was it, bunks, no mattress, just bunks. So we would bring air mattresses and sleep on these bunks. Well, everybody's so excited on Friday, and you stay up late, and you're fine. So Saturday morning, you've had a bad night. You've slept on this air mattress that may or may not have kept any of its air in it, but you make it through the night, and then you have a nice Saturday. It's fine. Saturday night, you're going back into these bunks, and it's always hotter than hell at these reunions. And we enjoy them. It's really, really hot. I don't think there's ever too many bugs, but it's just hot. So during the day, we stay wherever there might be some air conditioning, or if there's a pool, we definitely like those reunion spots where you could go to a pool. So during the day, you just kind of have to huddle together and sit and talk because it's too hot. And then at nighttime after you've eaten, Saturday night's always fun because we have a circle. Everybody gets in a circle, and the circle gets bigger and bigger as the evening goes on, and the shade gets wider. Everybody's drinking. All these state parks, you're not supposed to drink. I don't think you're supposed to bring any alcoholic beverages into any of them. We always do. They've never gotten mad at us. We just put it in a container where you can't see it, and we go our merry way. So they're sitting around drinking and talking and just enjoying everybody. And we'll stay out there really, really late. And if you happen to be a teenager during reunion, then you stay up even later. Then you go back to these hard bunks that don't have any mattresses, and you try to lay down on this air mattress that didn't work the night before. You're sweaty. You might have taken a shower that was cold because there's no hot water at the state parks. And then, but you feel better because now you're clean and a little bit cool. Go and lay on these mattresses, and then by Sunday morning, people are a little grumpy. They're not quite as happy as they were on Friday night or Saturday night. So when it comes time that you have finished breakfast, we used to have breakfast and then we'd have lunch. We finally cut down to just having brunch. A little bit later, breakfast. And then as soon as breakfast is over, everybody's cleaning up and getting out of there, and then they're gone. So, because they're tired. So now it's progressed to where we stay in hotels most of the time, and we stay at the farmhouse most of the time. As people get older, it's just too hard to go out there, that it's too hot. So that works out great. Anne and Collier are very generous with the farmhouse, and they love to have people come there and stay there. Your family goes out during the year and enjoys that, and they've invited other people to come and do that. But everybody looks forward to going to the farmhouse, and they've been generous enough to let us come there every year and sort of trash their house for a little bit. Although, and I know it's theirs. I totally respect that, and yet everybody thinks it's their house too. I think it's my house too. And I hope it stays in our family forever, whatever that family picture looks like, because it's just a really cool place. Oh my goodness, we have had over 100 at Reunion at one time. That was at the farmhouse. I do not remember who was boss, but Collier and Ann arranged to have a cowboy cookout by the stand of trees that's over to the, if you're looking at the farmhouse, it's over to the right. And Ruth brought her piano, and they had family sing of gospel music in the morning. And then we had this cowboy breakfast that they cooked for us out there. And at that reunion, there were over 100 people. And as you're asking me now, I can't tell you how many people are in the family. It's huge. We normally have a small family reunion is 50. But there's normally 60 to 80 people there. Mm-hmm. One year, the family produced 5 babies. So that was a cool year to have all the babies come to Reunion.
I guess kind of like that generation, what would you want to tell them about this family?
This is a family that loves and respects itself and has a close bond. They're always there for you if you need them. They don't talk bad about each other. They're always supportive of each other. And I used to think they didn't argue, and I don't think they did for a long time. I think they weren't allowed to argue as children. But they didn't argue. Now, as my mother got older and crankier, Patty, I know there were some arguments that went on. But it still was everybody. I don't think they held grudges. They all loved their home. They loved their family. I don't know what else to say about it. It's they're always welcoming of new members, but you better be sure that that's what they're going to be before you bring them to the house or to the reunion or to the state park, because they will be scrutinized to see if they're going to be suitable for the person that's picking them. And that's sort of tongue-in-cheek, probably some truth, probably some not. But it's a family that loves one another and continues to grow. I hope that Reunion lasts for a long, long time. I wonder what will happen when this next generation gets older and older, how it will pass. You had mentioned Boss earlier for Reunion. I don't know how that started. I'm thinking it was Grace that brought a Boss hat, but actually I think Geet might have brought the Boss hat for somebody. Or Carolyn. They're all pretty bossy, so it's hard to decide who came up with the Boss hat to start out with. But there's a Boss hat, and there was a Reunion briefcase that was passed down from one person to the other. And they started, I don't know when they started alternating who was planning the reunion, but they alternated it among the sisters. The brothers were not required to participate in that part. And so it went from Vida to Patty to Grace to Carolyn, no, to Ruth to Carolyn. And then since Geet didn't live in the area, then it went back to Vida. So for years they would have that rotation. And Geet would plan this Big 8 reunion that was always glamorous and fun and adults only for the family. And they all went. They'd go to the family reunion, and then they'd all go to the big adult reunion. Anytime anybody goes, well, we're going to get family together, we're going to do such and such. Okay, there they are. They do it. They do it to this day. There's a Big 8 reunion that happens in January at the farmhouse where just adults are invited. So it just passes on. Now, as Mother may have been the first one that opted out of running reunion, which might have been the year after she planned, I can't remember where we were, Mahia, I'm thinking. Oh, God, she planned a wonderful one at Mahia one time. Mother did a good job planning reunions. The first one that I can remember at Mahia, we went dancing. Do you remember that one? There was a dance place, a honky-tonk there in Mahia. So after dinner on Saturday night, we all packed up, whoever wanted to go from big to little, and went to this dance place and danced. And we had a great time, the country western dancing with each other. Before we started doing the state parks, we would meet at the Breeder Feeder Barn in Coleman. And we had a few at the beginning there, and then a few as we were transitioning for a while at the Breeder Feeder Barn, where we'd spend some time there. But we would have dances there, too. And the family would even welcome estranged members of the family, like Harvey, Geet's first husband. When he came to visit one year, everybody was just really happy to see him. My dad, Lucky, came to several reunions until my mother pleased asked that he not be invited to come anymore. And so they honored that request, and he wasn't invited to come anymore. But there's still a lot of love between my father and all the members of the family, and I think it's felt on both sides. So that they. In a lot of ways, they're very inclusive. I don't know what else to say about them. There were dynamics at the family reunion that I didn't understand for a number of years, that when you go to family reunion, everybody would just kind of start talking about themselves. They would almost be bragging. They would tell you all this stuff that was going on with them and what they had done. And I was always a little perplexed about that. And then at the same time, I always thought, well, nobody's asking me anything about what's going on with me. And then I finally decided, well, I need to just get in there, and as my goal for reunion, that I'm going to make sure that I get in there and find out what's going on with several different people, that's what I'm going to want to do. And it wasn't until I think this last year that I was riding with Carolyn somewhere, and she said that they were brought up that you didn't ask anybody what was happening with them, because that was being nosy, and you didn't do that. If they wanted you to know, they'd tell you. And all of a sudden I thought, okay, now I understand everything. Put a whole different light on it. I had a totally different perspective on it until I had that said. So there were rules that they had with growing up, and sayings that they had. I grew up saying, I would use this phrase, I'm so mad I could spit. And then I finally looked at Mother and I said, well, because I knew Mama said that same phrase. I said, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you spit if you were mad? And she goes, no, it's spit nails. I went, oh, okay, I didn't get the whole thing. So, oh God, there were tons of stories actually about Mama as she got older that I know. And she was an hysterical person. There were always these Mama stories. One of them is, first I've heard of it. Almost anything you tell her, well, it's first I've heard of it. Of course, you could have told her the whole thing before. Even in high school, I remember Collier, or maybe college, Kyer talking to Mama, and he'd tell her something, and then he could tell her the same thing 5 minutes later, and then he'd have to tell her again, 10 minutes later. And it was all, first I've heard of it. She didn't know anything about that. And he was very, very gentle with her about that. He would just repeat what he needed to say, and never said, well, I've already told you that. It was always just, here's the information again. I think he really respected his mother too. He talks about that he didn't know if he had 5 pairs of jeans or 10 pairs of jeans, but there was always a clean pair of jeans waiting for him in that wardrobe when he was ready to wear one. So the boys were not required, I don't think, to do any household work. So if they had to do that later in life, it must have been a big shock for them, because they were only required to do outside work, I think. But back on Mama's stories, I don't know if you want to get into this, but after Papa died, she married Sam, and I think they had been friends growing up, adult friends, family friends for a long time. And she really, I think, enjoyed that relationship. That was the first time I'd ever seen her wear pants. She'd always worn dresses before then. And it was really kind of a shame when Sam passed away as soon as he did. And then Mama got funnier and funnier as she started losing it. She married a man that to this day I only know as Tom, that old man. And she didn't know his name either. So all the family had to come and make sure this marriage was annulled, because they didn't think that he was a good fit for her at all. And he probably just said on the way home from church, "You want to get married?" She was, "Sure." She was pretty agreeable about almost anything. She lived with Mom for a while after. Do you already have the story of her going across the field?
No.
She was visiting with different people, and then she went back to Coleman and was staying with David and Betty, and she took out across the field, and she had packed her purse. She had her hairspray and she had her toothbrush. And they couldn't find her because she'd been gone for a while, and I think the weather kind of got bad. And finally a man on a tractor happened to cross her, and she had fallen and broken a tooth, and that's when they decided that she couldn't be on her own anymore. And so Mother was divorced at the time. I don't know if she came immediately. I don't know about the time frames for this, but she came and lived with Mother for a while. And she would come get ready for bed, and then she'd come to the hallway or the door where Mother was, and she goes, "Patty, do you have any idea who owns this house?" She'd go, "Yeah, pretty much do." She goes, "Okay." She'd go back. She just, continued, I think, to be pleasant to the very end. She was busy folding sheets, trying to get the sheet out from underneath her when she was in the hospital shortly before she died. She was always busy, always working. But just funny and loving of all the kids. And that one thing I know that runs through the whole family is that they love babies. Every time there's a new baby, everybody wants to hold the baby and play with the baby and see them. They've just always been really wonderful about babies.